Inception is a 2010 thriller and directed... Fuck! Let's do that again.
No, let's go.
Better to start off with a shitty start. Okay, anyway. Is it a director?
This is Auteur Detour, wherein three film lovers travel through the filmographies of cinema's most important directors in hopes of finding a greater understanding on the other side.
Inception is a 2010 thriller and director Christopher Nolan's seventh feature film. The movie centers on Leonardo DiCaprio's character Cobb, a professional thief who specializes in stealing secrets from people's dreams. In his one final job, Cobb and his team must do the opposite, plant an idea inside of a person's mind through their dreams. To do this, the team will enter dreams within dreams within dreams, complete with gravity-defying hallway fight scenes, rain-drenched shootouts and slow-motion vans falling from bridges, Arctic stronghold sieges, and a final confrontation on the crumbling shores of Cobb's own subconscious. If all this wasn't hard enough, the team's job is in a constant state of sabotage by the projection of Cobb's deceased wife, who has had Cobb framed for her own death and is the reason Cobb must take this final job in the first place. Inception is Nolan's most ambitious film yet, and if he wasn't already firmly cemented as an auteur before this one, Inception proves beyond the shadow of a doubt that this is a director in complete and total control of his craft. What'd you guys think?
I love it. I think it's great. I haven't seen it in a while, and it kind of felt new to me this time. I don't know. It was good. It was good. We'll talk about it. Well,
oh shit!
No, it was great. I loved it.
So, Chris, I know that it's one of your favorite movies, right?
Hell yeah! Yeah, we did. If for anyone who hadn't already listened, we have a personal top favorite movies
Wait,
episode.
This didn't make your top 10.
Yes, it did. It totally did. It died.
No, it didn't.
What?
It definitely didn't.
I don't remember it on your top 10.
It's definitely not in your top 10 in the episode.
Oh, well, it's one of my favorite movies. That top 10 shifts like the wind.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
it's always within my, amongst my favorite movies. So I would include it very highly up there, and it's definitely my favorite Christopher Nolan movie. Yeah, I love this movie so much. It's not perfect, but it's one of those movies that I forgive all the stuff that's not perfect about it, because I just love so much about it, from the score to the acting to the plot to the execution. It's just great. So I mean, I don't want to gush too much because a lot of people really love this movie, but I want to hear more about what you guys think.
You should gush a lot in this movie, because I feel like...
What do you think, Ian?
We've gotten to the part of the podcast that I've been sort of alluding to for this whole series, which we've essentially had almost the same opinion about every movie leading up to this, and yet I've kind of come off as the Nolan naysayer or whatever, not always on board with him.
Doubter?
And it's because
heretic?
It's because of this movie. I'm not a big fan of this movie.
This is so strange to me.
This is,
I can't. I do want to thank you, Ian. I was I feel tired. I feel like I don't have strong feelings about anything. You're rising my ire, and you're gonna get a good performance out of me with your horrible opinion. So go on. Why do you think this movie doesn't work? Because I think it is kind of his best movie, and I think it works better than almost all of his other films, maybe except for Memento. But Ian, why don't you like this movie?
Okay. Before we go on with that, I do want to say I do like this movie.
Oh.
Okay. I just said I don't. But I said I'm not a big fan of it. But mostly, I had only seen it once before. I mentioned that last week. But watching it again this week, I kind of was more on board than I ever have been. Or than I was before and in my memory of it. But mostly, it's a kind of Miles May Vary thing, with him, with Nolan. And I agree, this is the most Christopher Nolan movie.
We say that every week, but it's always true. It's
it always is true.
He just sticks to his theme so strongly. He just makes every film is like an artist statement, like with him, right? And I feel like that is why he's such like a brand name.
No, he feels like a Dragon Ball collector. Like with each movie, he gets more and more powerful with each passing movie. It seems like like he becomes more and more himself.
I kind of have
I was gonna say we are like watching him like hit his peak, in my opinion. You know what I mean?
That's exactly what I was just gonna say.
You can see his like rise in skill like so clearly through all his films. And this one, I when you said it's not perfect, Chris, I was like, wait, what? What'd you say? Like, but
well,
no, some of the action pieces, like especially in like the last sequence, we'll get there, but like, don't I think come together as strongly as like every single action sequence in Dark Knight. You know what I mean? Like, those are like so like perfectly calibrated. Compared to like, oh, let's put a rope up and some ski guys will hit it. I don't think that one was as meticulously constructed as like the Dark Knight action sequences.
I get it.
But the overall effect of the movie for me is like so powerful and emotional. But go on, Ian. Sorry.
I was also gonna say that this feels like his peak. Like it feels like we're gonna keep watching his movies and talking about him, and we might say the same thing next time, but it does feel like from here on it's either plateaued, like in terms of what he can bring to a movie, or less, or it's going downhill.
I wouldn't say plateaued. Like, I'm just talking about like how. Yeah, I don't know. I look at it very differently.
I guess
I'm like, wow, he really achieved something like transcendent, and you're like, oh yeah, he definitely plateaus in this one. Like,
well,
wow.
Plateau is not a bad thing if it's like the peak. I just mean like I can't imagine a more Christopher Nolan movie than this one. When he does go even more insular with something like Tenet, or really just Tenet. Like it doesn't work as well. Like I feel like this is him at like peak power in a lot of ways.
I don't want to talk about Tenet yet because like that requires its own like dissection. But what is good about this movie?
Yeah. Okay. I've got
everything. Everything is good about this movie.
I was really hoping you were both going to come into this episode like just talking about everything that you love about it, so that I could sit there and just kind of like, I don't want to lead this one because I'm not right. Like, I don't think that like my opinion of this movie should be the one that leads this episode, because it is sort of his best movie, I think, and it is like his most important movie, probably. Maybe The Dark Knight is actually, but I don't know. I just think like for me, the reason why it doesn't work is just the reasons why Nolan doesn't really always work for me. Like, because of like, it never stops expositing what's happening ever. It's like you're having this.
Ian, this is
incredible
what
this when you
action
need
you talked
that,
about
if
this.
anything
You
else.
talked about this. We all talked about this. Like, when we were talking about the action sequences that he directs, and they don't have like kind of the incredible kineticism of like some other directors. You know what I mean? But what he does have is like this kind of like momentum, like this forward momentum that feels like built on real physics. And I feel like his dialogue almost feels like the same way. It's like each line kind of allows you to get further and further into the story. And it's not like the most elegant writing, but it is like it propels the story forward. And in this movie, everything is always moving forward, and there's like there's no break. It's just like if you like. I didn't do it, but if you like looked at how long, it's a long ass movie, but if you like measured the scenes and the sequences, they're tiny little scenes. And there's a ton of talking happening, but all of it is like to move the story forward. And it gives you cool information about weird stuff. Like when they're explaining like the different dream levels and how time works differently, and then you see it happening in real life, and you see this machine that he's built with the script and happening. Does it make sense? I don't know. Does it have any kind of basis in like real dreams, like how they operate? I have no idea. Is it cool? Is it beautiful to behold, like this machine that he's created? I think absolutely. And and furthermore, I think the machine of this movie that he's built. We've talked about his movies being like a puzzle or like a contraption. There is like art there too. Like through that he is. Telling this story with like these emotional stakes, and even though the characters aren't super deep, they all have stupid names like Ariadne and Cobb, but like even with that, he's able to kind of create this incredible poetic world. To me, there's like I noticed it more this time than almost any other time. That moment where Tom Hardy is looking at Cillian Murphy being brought to his knees by the reveal of what's in his dad's safe, and just like breaking down and just giving this little smirk, like, you know, like that is Nolan's, like, that's like such a perfect Nolan thing, like a little beautiful little, I don't know, circle, like, you know, Ouroboros. It's like, yes, we're creating this beautiful, poetic, emotional contraption that can like shake you to your core. And it's like, aren't I a clever little boy? You know what I mean? Like in the same moment. Yeah, I don't know.
All of that works for me, and even all of the exposition for the first 2 hours.
I love
of
the
movie
exposition. Like more movies should have exposition.
I'm saying,
yeah,
every like it's building to this heist, really, you know, and it's all of that exposition where it's building this world. Like you said, it's kind of clunky. It doesn't necessarily all make sense, like in our world, but it makes sense in the world of the movie, and I can get on board with that. But then it's when the heist is happening and they're still shooting people and being like, you know, Elliot Page is like, oh my God, we just killed somebody. Is that killing somebody in real life? And he's like, no, it's this thing. It's like, can we just get to the fucking part where we understand what's going on? Because also, that character should understand what's going on right now anyway.
Nah,
like,
we don't even know. I remember specifically being in the, and I think I've said this before, but like when the van was falling in ultra slow motion, probably with that one, probably, even though, you know, he loves practical effects, there was probably some like computer slowdown there too, and it's gonna hit the water. I remember being on the edge of my seat and just like holding my breath and being like, when that van hits the water, and then being like, I don't know what'll happen, but it's gonna be bad, like, you know, like something's gonna happen. I don't think you need to really know what's going on to like appreciate this movie. And like,
well, that's what I'm saying. I didn't need to know what's going on all the time. I was ready for them to just sort of like proceed with what we had in our quiver. Like I didn't need to like have it just keep going. Like once he started going into, let me quote this, unconstructed dream space.
Yeah.
You know?
Sure.
Like that's a crucial part of the movie that maybe, I mean like a crucial part of the important like plot of the movie.
Some of the best imagery in the movie.
Yeah. But once they, like, you're so far into the movie when they explain what that is, when they, you know, exposit what that is, that it's kind of like, okay, and now there's this other thing that I just wanted it to like get going at a certain point, and I never felt like it got
never
going, even though it was
It never stops going.
I disagree, because you're also in the midst of, you need like a little bit of a break, because it's just like action scene on top of action within an action scene within an action scene, and like for a minute you just need to kind of maybe breathe for a second, and I think that's maybe where that comes in handy, you know, like Mad Max Fury Road is like chase. Then all of a sudden, like the light goes out after the thing, and then like, okay, let's take a breath before we do another crazy thing. You know, I don't know. I think it works. It's great. It's fine. I do hear what you're saying though, Ian. Though, no, I one of the things I didn't care for after I watch it really closely is I don't mind the exposition. In fact, with a movie with this many layers to it, I think becomes necessary, especially now that Nolan has a crowd of people who have followed him because of a huge franchise like Batman, right? There may be, you know, viewers that are just more used to, like, I don't know, the traditional, less thought involving movies, I suppose. So the exposition is not a problem. It flows fine. It is what it is. What I didn't care for was, as we know, Christopher Nolan is not the greatest writer of women. And so Elliot...
no, and that's another part.
You know, of course, Elliot Page is Ellen Page at this point in her career, in his career, but the character of Ariadne, almost entirely, if you look at virtually everything that the character does, it exists as a surrogate for us, so the plot can be explained to us. Really, it's like she has a little bit of agency toward the end when she does some things to move the plot along, but almost everything, we don't see her working much at all. It's just like the thing has been constructed because that was her job. She's in the dream, and now Ariadne exists purely to have the characters explain what's happening to us, almost. And very other characters exist for that purpose, and that was kind of one of the biggest gripes I had about this, one of the only gripes I have about this movie. It's not a big deal, really.
I like being invited into a movie. I will take Elliot Page as a surrogate any day of the week. Like, maybe if it was not as good an actor, they couldn't have pulled it off. But I thought they were great. I thought it was great.
Marion Cotillard also. I mean, it just feels
this is Nolan's ultimate like bitches be crazy movie.
Yeah.
Like I don't understand how like what goes on in women's minds movie.
And it really feels like it's him, you know, giving in to the fact that he just doesn't want to. Like he just is just like, I'm not gonna write for female. You know, it's like there's so many characters in this movie, and they're all. It's again, you know, it's fractions of a mind kind of thing. Nobody has less sort of depth than she has in my mind. I mean, even Tom Hardy's character, like, you know, he doesn't have any real backstory or anything, but you feel like that there's a character there. Like she's just, although she is obviously not the real Maul that we're seeing, but I don't know.
It's not the real Maul, and I mean that's what he's saying. Like he literally says it in the movie, like what I can conjure in my mind of you does not do you justice. I feel like that's like an admission of Nolan, like talking about his ability to conceive of women, you know, is not good. And I think I feel like there's like a lot of lines in this movie that you know you can look at different ways. Like it's him saying something like just straight up, you know. And that's what I want to talk about. Why I think this is maybe the best Christopher Nolan movie. You know, I've talked about this kind of effect in his films where, you know, there's certain types of characters, specifically the types of characters we see in these movies. These like big money players, like, you know, just exerting their will on reality, and like these kind of obsessive like craftsmen. He loves, you know, just like Michael Mann, these like uber professionals. And in this, but he also likes people that have the money and the resources to enact like insane kind of power. And like that's another thing that like you don't see as much in Michael Mann. It's, you know, it's a totally different thing. Like this is a specifically Christopher Nolan thing. But when you get outside, and this movie does have like weird parallels to like so many of his other movies, like the training montages in this one, developing the technologies and explaining how it's all going to work. Did you guys notice they were in a big warehouse with giant industrial windows papered over exactly like Michael Caine explained they were going to do to the windows in The Prestige? I love how he goes back to these same images again and again, you know, like it is really fun to like be in that world. I love his vision for it. Anyway, when he gets outside of those central characters, the world kind of dissolves, right? When he has to like talk about like, you know, the mobsters in the Batman movie feel super fake. You know what I mean? Every woman feels super fake. Like there's that feel, you know, like Barbara Gordon or whatever. But in this movie, because the world is so, you know, because there is the question hanging over the entire movie, is this really happening or not? You know what I mean? It kind of allows him to get away with that, I think, in a way. You know, when Leonardo DiCaprio is running through the alleyways and they start narrowing down, like he's in like a, you know, Dr. Caligari or something like that. Right. You're not like, that's a strange way to design an alleyway, or you are, but you're just some like internet pedant, you know, like, you know, the whole point is like, oh, like it's a fake thing. You can do that if you want to. It adds to the, you know, the excitement of the movie, and it has like a narrative, you know, function, I guess, or a role. And I just happened this week to stumble upon this incredible tweet by, I don't know if you guys have seen this or heard of this, the movie Let's All Go to the World's Fair. Have you heard of that?
Yes, I've seen it.
Okay. You seen it? How'd you like it?
Yeah, I didn't like it at all.
It's not, well, I'm going to hold off judgment. So I'm really intrigued by this movie, everything I've seen about it and heard about it, and I followed the director on Twitter. So this week was David Lynch's birthday, and David Lynch is like my favorite filmmaker, and this is what the director of that movie had to say about David Lynch. The thing Lynch does better than anyone else in the history of cinema is play with gradients of reality, starting from an understanding that all film, like life itself, can be understood as a dream. So all film, like life itself, can feel real and unreal. His movies are constantly interweaving between different layers of artifice and sincerity. His structures are fluid and complex, and his characters and narratives all exist in service of the reality play. The most productive question you can ask to understand the structure of the World's Fair is what is real and what is unreal in this scene, with an understanding that definitionally every film or video ever made is always both. And I feel like that's such a
That's really a good quote.
It really I mean, obviously that's
Yeah.
so clear in David Lynch's films, but I think it's also really clear in this movie. You know, he for as grand and elaborate as these worlds are that he creates, and there's so much like press about what he crashing real airplanes and building entire buildings and stuff like that, and doing all the effects like in camera. His worlds are not convincing in a lot of ways. Do you know what I mean? They're real and they're physical, and you can like be immersed in them. But again, I feel like you can see like the edges of the stage, and I think that's like part of what I love about his films so much, and I think that's part of what everybody likes about it. I think that feeling of like this is something that's made, and you can feel it being made, and you can feel those hard edits, and you can feel the edge of the stage. Someone was talking about Everything Everywhere All at Once, and that was a movie that I found, a little bit tiresome, but like one of the things that was so exciting for a lot of people seeing that film was you could see how it was made. You know what I mean? Like you can see that artifice of it, again, reflecting like the artifice of reality, and I feel like this movie, Inception, again, not really Lynch-like in any way, but there is that kind of movie, that the quality of like you're watching a movie, it's not real, we're going to explore dreams, and there is this, once again, Nolan is doing like a phenomenology of the mind playing out in like a movie, and like we get to kind of observe and experience how those things are similar within the structure of like the film, which is not, again, that's all I would say, yeah.
This is not a coincidence that you're talking about David Lynch right now, because he also sort of explores the world of dreams that feel, like, or we're living in his dream world in the same way that we're kind of living in Christopher Nolan's dream world in this movie. But I did write
in all his
about
movies.
Lynch in my notes. Like, that's why I'm saying it's not a coincidence,
Yeah.
but it is kind of interesting that I was writing about David Lynch in my notes too. But the thing that I was writing, and this goes back to what I was saying about Miles May Vary, is like I had this feeling the first time I watched it, and then I completely forgot, and then I had the exact same feeling this time that I watched it, which is just, you have $180 million and 0 notes from a studio, and I just wish that like I could live in like David Lynch's dream world with that kind of like access, you know what I mean? Like, and I'm not saying that like notes and money, or no notes and money make.
No, but I don't understand what you think.
But
What don't you like? Guys in suits in like on sparkling beaches, going in like big mansions on the sides of cliffs. Like, what don't you love about this movie? Like, it's. I almost wore a suit to this podcast, by the way. I really wanted to show up in like a full suit and just be like.
It's just not the way that I dream in David Lynch. Like, I don't dream in Christopher Nolan. Like, I don't have access to it. Like, the people say, like, when you relate to a movie or to a song, like, it's because it's, like, speaking your language in your brain,
Sure.
And I don't speak Christopher Nolan's language. Like, I can appreciate it, and I can, like, marvel at it sometimes, at, like, sort of the majesty of what he can do with, in-camera effects and that kind of thing. But it doesn't, like, activate my voice in my brain the way that, like, a David Lynch does. You know? And so that's what I mean by Miles May Vary. It's not about, like, good or bad. It's just not speaking to me, in the same way. So that's why I'm
All
like,
right.
I can't.
Chris, you and I are going to talk for the rest of the podcast.
Yeah,
Ian's disinvited.
Let's do it. Let's talk about Hans Zimmer here, Travis.
It doesn't speak to you. That's fine. Recuse yourself. No,
but I do have opinions. I mean,
no. The thing about it's funny to talking about David Lynch, because there's something else that he does in his movies, which is he has this theme of creating your own reality. And like, I read this book actually called The Impossible David Lynch. Maybe I've mentioned it before, where he talks about how every David Lynch movie starts with like, or there's a moment in a David Lynch movie where a protagonist reaches like this point where reality is stifling them to the degree where there's no overcoming it. And yet almost every David Lynch movie has a happy ending where they can somehow fantastically or, supernaturally or, miraculously overcome any obstacle for a happy ending. And sometimes that involves like a character rewriting reality from like inside their brains. And in Dune, it kind of happens literally. Like, you know, the character becomes like this god figure, and he can just do whatever he wants. But in Mulholland Drive and Lost Highway, you're part of those stories are like characters who've created their own reality inside their mind, and you're kind of living in that world, and then you kind of you peek out of it every once in a while, but then you go back in. Well, don't Memento and Inception, specifically in his films, deal with that, like the desire to kind of create your own reality, and the fact that what you see and what you hear and what you experience is not necessarily doesn't necessarily have to reflect the real world 100%, right? So if you have that choice, why not, you know, get the world that you want?
Right.
So that's another. What's that?
I can appreciate that. Like, it's, I mean, I can appreciate it while still not like getting sucked into the movie.
What did you think about both of you guys? Like,
wait, Chris, what were you going to say about Hans Zimmer? I don't want to.
Oh, I missed that. Sorry.
No, this is the best score of so many, almost any movie I can think of that just makes it so good. Again, it's kind of tangential because it's not related to what you guys were just talking. I just threw it out there as a point, but it's such an immersive, like droning, like ominous yet like tension-inducing score that just kind of goes on, and it's, I don't know.
It's so effective. Yeah.
For me,
it is such a Nolan like crucial score.
Absolutely.
Like it fits with this movie. It makes this movie.
Totally, because for someone like myself, you know, for the audience, I'm hard of hearing, so I often don't pick up on a lot of nuances and a lot of cues that may be audio oriented, but this score is so important, I think, to my experience of this movie, that it's I can't watch this movie without thinking of Hans Zimmer and like feeling the every note, and even those harsh, you know, the kind of unsettling notes that periodically like lace the movie, because there's so many different layers literally in the dream and on the surface of the script that are happening that are all sort of tied together, and the score does a fantastic job of weaving all that together, because it could be really treated differently just simply with the different audio, I think. And it's just masterful. Like, it's one of the many reasons I love this movie is because it all comes together, and the score is a tremendous part of that for me.
It is such a big part of this movie, and I have nothing to say negative about the score of this movie. I think it's, you know, we talked about Christopher Nolan finding his voice with Hans Zimmer, and like, this is the voice, like this, like that's the thing, right? Like, it's impossible to think of Christopher Nolan's score without just making that sound.
It's pretty crazy the influence that noise had on like movies and movie trailers for like the next like 10 years after that.
Yeah.
Like,
is that right? How so?
It was
Chris doesn't watch trailers, but it was used in everything.
It was just, you just heard it everywhere. It was just like became like the like kind of de facto like action movie thing, or like, you know, suspense movie thing. It's very cool. I don't have anything bad to say about it, but I could imagine, because I mean he writes what, like 3 little riffs for this movie. I mean, he does the bum, he does the little James Bond one, and then he does like then he does the emotional kind of one that kind of only hits a couple times, especially at the end. But my God, it's effective. But I could imagine being a film scorer and writing some like kind of symphony and stuff, and then seeing Hans Zimmer come up with, again, 3 little riffs and being like, what the, you know, like just like,
but I mean,
resenting him for it.
It's not like he's just playing like an Edith Piaf song. Like, he's fucking with it a lot, you know? Like, that's what the score is, you know? It's that Edith Piaf song,
the bum part,
way down.
Yeah. I'm just saying, like, he gets a lot of mileage out of like really simple things, and that is a skill, and it's very impressive. But I can imagine like, you know, listening, being like a, you know, classical composer and being like a little frustrated that like people just eat it up, you know.
But people respond to that. I mean, like, Nolan himself loves to take things and repeat them ad nauseum, not ad nauseum,
absolutely,
over and over again.
But like
in this movie, no,
you know, I know I said I hated that screenwriting 101 thing, where, you know, you say something at the beginning of the movie and then you say it again later. I take it back. This movie does that like so beautiful because this movie takes it to it kind of transcends that, right? Like it's not just a screenwriting 101 thing. It's literally like saying things that almost make no sense even when you're saying them because you just want to have some cool poetic thing to say. When he's like, when Saito is like, hey, will you do this job for me? Or do you want to become an old man alone, filled with regret, like, waiting to die? And it's
Waiting to die.
I need to say that anytime anyone asks me to do anything. Like, hey, ready to record the episode? Or do you want to become an old man waiting to die alone? Filled with regret. It's like, it's just these great lines that kind of like, I love the script of this movie. I love I wish more movies would explain stuff. If more movies came up with super creative worlds like this and complex rules we had to follow in order to like understand the action, I would love to hear about it. You know what I mean? Tell me all about it.
Can I give you 2 examples of movies that do it? Because I wrote down 2 examples of movies that almost operate in the same way, but like somehow do grip me.
Yeah.
And
please say Terminator 2.
The Matrix.
Please say Terminator.
Terminator 2, good call. But no, The Matrix is one, right? The Matrix is like constant exposition,
yes.
But it's just hits in a different way to me.
Right.
And the other one is Inside Out, which is doing the same thing, right? And like, don't laugh because it's a kid's movie. It's fucking very like much the same thing where it's taking you into this world that maybe it makes sense and maybe it doesn't. Like it definitely is supposed to just make sense in the movie, and it's operates the same way. They're never not sort of taking you through the mind of this kid and like, is constantly expositing, but it doesn't feel like it in the same way to me.
The wall of boyfriends creating the escape route out of the brain or whatever was a little weak. That was they were trying to hit deadline with that solution, but the rest of it is a good script. It's a good script.
I agree with you about that.
That's one kind of like they just kind of papered over that ending, but
they're taking you through and they'll always be like, oh no, this is the train of thought or whatever, just like teaching, like just taking you through, and it's all the same kind of story structure and exposition structure. But like,
it's funny because I don't think
it's...
Inception would exist without The Matrix, and I don't think Inside Out would exist without Inception.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I don't say no to that. I think you might be right. Yeah. I definitely think Inception wouldn't exist without The Matrix. I'll say some good things about this movie if I can, because I do think that I don't want to just talk shit about it. I think it's really good in a lot of ways, and mostly it's funny that I was kind of laughing when you were saying what didn't work for you about the action, Travis, because to me the action is like my favorite part of this movie. I said in my notes, like, it's my second favorite James Bond movie. Like, it really, like, I love the heist aspect of it. And, like, especially that, like, I get...
What's your favorite James Bond movie? Sorry, you can't just drop that.
Casino Royale.
Okay, good choice.
Oh, I was going to say, which also wouldn't exist without Christopher Nolan. But the heist part of it, especially the fact that, like, I did get emotional. Like, the emotional part to me wasn't necessarily the DiCaprio and Cotillard stuff. Like, that kind of all feels a little too on the Nolan nose for me. But the Cillian Murphy or however you say his name, with his dad stuff, when he pulls out, like you said, that like that moment when he's getting incepted and he has this sort of epiphany that was planted in him, and like it feels real, and you know that it's not real, and you know that he's gotten tricked, but you're like, this is what we need to like make peace and move on, Like that was
yearn for catharsis, right?
Yeah, exactly. And like it worked. Like I was like, oh, this is really good. Like all that stuff really fucking works for me. Like it was a successful heist.
Yeah, and it's also right? funny when he like buys into the thing that they so obviously kind of set up for him. But because I was thinking of like The Prestige, where he's like, we don't want to know the trick, we don't want to know how they do it, we want to believe it, and that's such like a Nolan thing, it's like suspend your disbelief a little bit, like I feel like people these days are really bad at suspending disbelief. I feel like everybody wants to be like a know-it-all, and everybody wants to like call like know the actors, and I don't know, it's just like. I wish people would be...
But you even mentioned in previous episodes that, like, he kind of loves to throw you like moments where you are forced to suspend your disbelief.
Absolutely,
like
and I think that's what I'm talking about. That's what running down the alleyway and stuff like that. He really kind of like he pushes it in your face in this movie.
Maybe he explains this part of it, and I just always glaze over the both times I've watched it. But did they ever really explain how you're bringing other people into your dreams with you? Is that like
it's military technology?
Exactly. It's this sort of like, that's the leap of faith you have to take, is like everything else is just sort of dream technology, like stuff that you can imagine is just part of your mind.
Yeah.
And once you can get in there, that makes sense. But bringing other people in your mind, they just kind of gloss over that, which I'm fine with. Like, I'm totally happy to take that leap of faith with him. Like,
I just want to say the thing about Cillian's kind of revelation or whatever. He and Christian Bale are both so good at like the repressed emotion thing and like the kind of like stiff upper lip British thing, you know, where they're just giving like this blank face performance and so much emotion is like behind their eyes. They're such like joys to watch in that way, both of them. I can't wait to see him in Oppenheimer, but but yeah, in this movie he really does like a great job of being like, oh, this guy wants to cry really badly. We're gonna see this man broken down. Like you know who else does a good job, if I may?
Please.
So the same year this movie came out, my other favorite director besides David Lynch, Martin Scorsese, came out with a movie, and it was called Shutter Island. And Leonardo DiCaprio gives a performance where he is like, he's afflicted with this like mental thing. So we go inside his brain and see these kind of dream visions, and it was weirdly like similar to this movie in some ways.
To this movie,
but
it was insane to watch both of them in the same year.
It was a little crazy, and what was really shocking to me, because like, I mean, every Martin Scorsese movie that comes out to me is like an event, and like I went to see the movie, and like, you know, Leonardo DiCaprio gives this kind of like hammy performance, and every time he has one of these dream visions, he just stands there, and then CG stuff kind of happens around him, and he's like doing a face, but you can tell he's just like writhing around like with a green screen, and it was so inert, and it was so kind of like boring to watch. Like I you know, the movie had a lot of stuff in it that I liked, not one of Martin Scorsese's best, I think, but like what was shocking was just the way that this movie, without making Leonardo DiCaprio give any kind of specific emotion, was able to give like a story where like, oh yeah, this is a guy who has like a lot of rage and a lot of like, you know, sadness and stuff like that. He's not going to deal with it like in front of you, but like, just, you can see it in his eyes. You can see it after the jobs, just like the weariness of him, you know? And this, I kind of like that, you know, Christopher Nolan doesn't seem to question the, you know, the fact that he's like a thief and the fact that he's like screwing people's lives over, you know what I mean? But it comes up in the form of guilt over his wife, right? It's really like in the place of a guilt. That's like the focus of a general guilt about like how you move in the world. And when you do big things and great things, like what pain are you going to cause? Or, you know what I mean?
But he's also just doing corporate espionage. Like, it's so funny that like the plot of this movie really centers around Ken Watanabe wanting to like break up his rival company's you know, business, basically. It's like, but yeah, you're right. It doesn't focus on that like smartly. And I think that was DiCaprio's doing. Speaking of how good DiCaprio is, like, obviously the script is Nolan's, but DiCaprio came on and worked like incredibly hard on the script with him because he read it and was just like, you're not going to get the audience on board with my character. Like, you have to give him more life. Like, you have to give him more heart. And so I don't know what he wrote, but you can kind of feel what's not Nolan about this movie to me. And it is the sort of more like, you know, he's got more character. I don't know.
Well, oh, go ahead, Chris.
Oh, no, you just touched a second ago on a point that Travis made back in the Batman Begins episode, where Christopher Nolan's really great at taking something and showing it to you and then kind of making you forget that it's there. Like, don't worry about that. Let's focus and ease you into the story. Like the lady who just sort of disappears into the background after this is Ra's al Ghul, but she's still right there. You just forget about her, you know? And so to that point, like forgetting that, yeah, maybe these guys are actually, you know, thieves who are maybe ruining people's lives, or maybe this guy's, you know, empire doesn't deserve to be dismantled, or maybe this guy's this Indian dude is a total drug dealer dude who's like, you know, dealing in illicit substances, but it's okay. Don't worry about that. You know, all of it doesn't really matter because, you know, the mastery of Nolan, and we're more involved in the story and what's going to happen at the end of it than the larger circumstances that the story implies, I suppose. I forget where we were going with that before. You just brought it up, and
Well, we were talking about how good DiCaprio.
Well,
was in this movie,
he's so much better
Yeah.
when he's not trying to show an emotion directly.
Like the Revenant,
in my opinion, just him running around. Look at the camera shows you his eyes. That's all you need. And I feel like as much as Christopher Nolan goes over the top with exposition or over the top with some of his visuals and the action, the humanity of the characters or the emotion of the characters, the way it kind of hits you kind of at a, in a Dwight angle or whatever, works really well. Yeah, in my opinion.
Do you remember on the Coen Brothers season, we sort of, in the wind-up of that, we were talking about who's the ultimate Coen Brothers character? I think you could I could make a very big case that Cobb is the ultimate Nolan character.
Yeah, agreed.
Especially the way that DiCaprio plays him.
Yes.
You know, because it's this is what I wrote about it.
He's also not the first Cobb, right? For Christopher Nolan.
No,
right?
exactly. But I think that the Cobb that
salad, if
the
you will.
other guy plays in Following is not the ultimate. He's the rough draft of it, right? But then the DiCaprio Cobb is, I said, not only the ultimate Nolan character in terms of willing himself forward and having a dead wife and being good at his job, which are all three very important Nolan things.
And wearing a suit.
But
wearing a suit.
Sweet
but also
suit.
He's completely goal driven
Being related
and
to
willing to do
Michael
whatever
Caine.
it takes. But he's also completely goal driven and willing to do whatever it takes and hurt anybody who's in the way of doing what it takes. He doesn't consider his crew that he hires, he's just no, this is what needs to get done and I'm gonna do it, and that's a very Nolan thing too. I mean,
absolutely. Speaking of, Ian, when you brought up the character getting a little reworking in the screenwriting process, there's a moment of the script, and this is what I was kind of talking about before, about the fact that what they say in the script can have a totally different meaning if you just take it literally or if you remove it from the context of a film. There's a part where Ariadne literally sounds like a screenwriting coach, where she asks, "What's down there?" in the subconscious or whatever, and Cobb says, "The truth that we want Fisher to learn," and she goes, "I mean, what's down there for you?" And it's it's literally someone's asking, no, what's Cobb gonna find when he goes down there? And it's that's somebody needs to say it, just say it.
Yeah,
I love it.
Well, so speaking of screenwriting coach, there's the famous fact that's very obvious to me, and I'm sure to you guys, that this was an analogy for making a movie, right? You guys know this.
Every Christopher Nolan movie, you could say that about, I feel,
But he even, talks in depth about, how he wrote this movie and how he assigned each character a trait for making a movie. It was part of actively part of him making this movie.
Yeah.
Does that interest you guys? I'm curious about how you feel about it. I find it mildly interesting. I think it's...
I think that's what this movie is about. I think it's
thinks.
what the movie is about. I don't think... I think breaking it down and saying, oh, these characters mean this... Again, it's there's something to that, but it's every element is about filmmaking. Again, I think the fact, just the way every shot operates is sort of again, calling attention to itself and being about that and being what? Look, we made this world. Oh, but there's something wrong with it, so you can tell it's not real, but it's somewhere down there it's real, maybe.
Yeah.
Is it?
So I said on the Prestige,
that
at the end of the Prestige episode, that was his movie of being to his fans, this is how I do it, right? And I feel this was really him making that movie all the way of just being this is what it's like to make a movie. And I do think it's interesting. I mean, we haven't talked enough about the characters in this movie, but like that Saito, who's the studio system, right? Or just like a studio, like he is pro studio, and a lot of this movie is about saving the studios, right? And like what they can give him and what he can give them. And it's funny that I started by saying like he gets $180 million and no notes, but like, you know, Saito makes an argument for notes, right? In this movie, like he makes an argument for getting studio notes in this movie when he's just like, "Oh, you think I'm just a passenger on this thing?" Like Saito says that, right?
He is, and he gets shot. He gets in the way, and it almost ruins everything.
He gets in the way, but like he's, you know, I mean, yeah, I guess he is, but you know,
he's dead weight.
He also helps. Like, no, he helps. He does help.
No,
he's not.
No.
He buys the airline.
Saito helps.
He's necessary, but necessary dead weight, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't help. You know, can I say who was my least favorite character in this movie? Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
I knew you were gonna say that. I didn't even need.
I knew you too, just because there's only like 5 characters, and he's like the last one we haven't talked about. But why not? What's wrong with him?
I don't like the way he talks and the way he's so.
I thought you were gonna say he's too smug or something. Like he's just walking around with a big. Yeah, this is actually one of the few movies I don't mind him in. There's a lot of ones I'm like.
He sucks.
Disagree.
Yeah, I kind of have mixed feelings about him sometimes. You know, when he was younger, he really bugged me. Like in those like teen movies and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Third Rock from this. I mean, yeah. If you're acting next to what's his name, John Lithgow, you can't help but come off well. You can't help but come off like understated and classy, in my opinion. But in everything else, you know, like those like 10 Things I Hate About You, wasn't he in that and stuff?
Yeah.
Like I just found him
like
kind of like
one of those baseball
grating
movies.
and annoying. I feel like he's one of those child actors who kind of like learned on the job, and you see him in Brick or something like this, and you're like, okay, he's got a little more control of himself. So I don't mind him at all, actually, in this. He definitely talks funny, and that impersonation was very humorous. But
but no, I just think I did appreciate. So one thing about this movie that bothers me is how unfunny it is when it's trying to be funny. When
Don't think of an elephant.
When the driver crashes the car and it's just like, "You guys see that?" And then he's like talking to sleeping people, like that stuff's so cheesy to me. Or when Joseph Gordon-Levitt, the terrible joke when he kisses Elliot Page and is like, "Oh, it's worth a shot," or whatever, it's like that stuff's just cheesy to me.
I don't think it's really that funny. They're not like laugh lines, but
that's
it's
a
just
laugh
to
line.
have
That was a trailer line.
It's not supposed to be a laugh line. It's just like kind of showing some humor.
But I do think that where it does have a little bit of a sense of like lyrical humor is like when he's pulling them with the extension cord or whatever, the cable through and it's balletic and like really sort of just like a humorous image in a weird way. Not in a funny way, but just like I really appreciated that. And that part of Joseph Gordon-Levitt's performance when he is sort of this like sleek guy that's doing all of the action in this movie practically.
And I feel like
at least
him as an actor too, he's always down for that kind of stuff. Like I feel like I don't follow his career or anything, but I feel like the interviews I've seen with him or whatever, when he's talking about stuff, he's just like 100% down to do whatever, and that's why I feel like
he did a great job with all of that stuff.
Yeah, I feel like that's why he's a good Christopher Nolan person, because he like wants to do crazy stuff like that.
One of the reasons this movie works so well for me is the consistent approach of Christopher Nolan using practical effects whenever humanly possible. Because when you're creating a movie about dreams and trying to get people on board with the reality of a dream, you could easily just make CGI this, that, or the other, and it just takes you completely out of the film. At least it does for me. The only thing I could tell that was CGI done in this movie was the like subconscious part where the camera sort of is like a helicopter shot spanning across the shore, and you see the buildings kind of crumbling, and even that looks good, but it's not like quite real, but that's okay. Like the fight scene wherein the van is flipping, and then the layer below it, Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character is running at full speed, and it's literally in a rotating hallway. And I even wanted to watch the making of that scene. It's so good. I remember watching that in the theater.
It's an incredible set.
It is, and you watch it in the theater like, this is totally real. Like this isn't like fake. This is something like I can't take my eyes off of, and it's a lot of it's shot in one take, or one longer take. Just the van falling out of the sky, the people like actually really going high speed on skis, firing weapons and whatnot. It's just
also sitting like them wearing headphones in the van is another sort of not funny thing to me, where I'm just like, I love the imagery of this. That's like
super slow motion floating through like their feet and their hands are just kind of like floating weightlessly. It just feels real. It just feels good, and you need that element of sincerity, I think, when you're trying to craft a movie that's believable, that you want people to get behind. Because honestly, my dreams aren't like what Christopher Nolan has constructed. My dreams are like Fellini. He is the closest director. We talk about directors who do a great job of capturing a dream. David Lynch feels like the most dream-like director, but for me, there's no movie that captures dreams better to me, and it's not really a dream, than 8.5. I've mentioned it before, but there's something really odd and very strange about the way you can film that. Sort of like Godard and what is it, Weekend, or one of his movies where, I mean, every movie is like a jump cut. That's how my dreams are. Like, it's one thing just jumps right to another, and it's like, I can't explain it. But so Christopher Nolan's movies aren't constructed to me like my dreams, but I can see the dream being created via camera and directorial magic that doesn't feel forced. It doesn't feel like, here, believe me.
My dream world is more like, have you guys seen a Serbian film?
I
I'm
wanted
just
to, and kind of don't want to see it.
But no, I felt like, I remember the first time I saw this movie and they were in the cafe and he's like, how did we get here? And she's like, oh, well, of course we, and I was like, that's cheating. You can't do that. But it's like, that is how dreams work, and that is how movies work. You cut to a new thing, and it's just like, you just take it for granted. You fill in the details, like they said. I mean, everything they're saying really, again, does work as a dream if you think about it in a very technical sense, and you kind of ignore the fact that the visuals are very straight. That's the whole point of the technology. When you're in the dream world, vis-a-vis with this like military technology, it feels like a real place because they've constructed it to look like a real place, and that's how it's used in the movie. But the point is, I think that works so well. Like the idea of like, I don't know, the parallel between like the way dreams work and the way movies work, and it's sometimes a little on the nose, I guess. But Ian, you're saying you were complaining about how this movie doesn't live up to what your dreams are, but like, when they're walking in limbo at the end, all those visuals, did you find any of that kind of like poignant? I mean, because you were saying for you, the real emotion happened when he pulls out the what is it called? Pinwheel? So like, to me, that felt very staged, and like that seemed very ironic, how much emotion that they were putting onto that moment, because we knew it was fake, and it doesn't work. But to me, the real poignancy isn't necessarily just like the relationship stuff between him and this, again, like evil version of Mal, which, speaking of like stupid names, but like the flooded like city and like the crumbling architecture of like on the beach, and like the childhood home that's kind of sitting like on this like water. There's something about it that's just like the way that memory affects you, and the way that time and death kind of like haunt you, and like this like, I feel like Christopher Nolan, again, this is like, this may not be the way I see the world, but Christopher Nolan is so amazing at conveying the way he sees the world, which is like this beautiful, orderly place that can be like mastered and that you can impose your will on and reshape. But there's always something unknowable. And all his movies have something that's like supernatural, or it feels supernatural, or science fiction, because there's always a place where reason and order kind of break down. And when you're in that limbo space and the music gets like kind of weird, and it's just so beautiful to me. And to me, even if you had a problem with the entire rest of the film, did you feel any kind of like, oh wow, well this was worth seeing? Because for me, it was like, I was...
No, I'm just kidding. No,
Fair enough.
no, I'm just kidding.
Shouldn't have asked that.
The truth is that like it. Okay, so this is what I've been kind of scared to say because I know I'm gonna sound like the worst kind of person saying this, but
Say it.
it felt.
I hate.
God,
No.
I have to say this in a way that doesn't completely make me sound like a fucking arrogant piece of shit, but I felt like I understood too much, like right away. That like every time he was explaining something, I'm like, yeah, I get it, right? And I'm not trying to say I'm smarter than everybody else. I'm just saying that like it was the same thing as like when I was watching The Sixth Sense in the theater, and I was like 25 minutes in, I'm like, oh, he's dead. And the rest of the movie, I'm like, okay, like, I get what you're doing, but he's dead, right? Spoiler alert for Sixth Sense. I'm sorry, you know? And I felt like that with this, where I was just like, I get what's happening here, and you're taking a lot of fucking time to tell me what's happening, but I already get it. Like, I get it, right?
But that's what
And
I'm
so
saying. It's not. I don't feel like this movie works like that. Like a puzzle where it's simply like, oh, it's just saying this one simple thing, but it's like, it's imagery that you have to see and experience.
Like a puzzle. I think it's supposed to be like a puzzle that you're kind of putting together.
That's how I used to feel about his movies. Now I feel differently. Now I feel like, I don't know.
So my answer was that like by the time it gets to that part where the sort of catharsis is happening for him down there with Maul and with making peace with, you know, his guilt kind of thing and trying to be able to move on, I was just like, okay, like it's getting put together. Good. But it didn't feel emotional to me because I was just like, this is what I saw coming. Like I saw it coming. I don't know.
Maybe I'm just a dummy because it took me multiple viewings to actually like get this movie, so I'm probably a little more slow than most people.
There's a lot. They threw a lot of crap at you in this movie, and yeah. But and you know, there are different ways to appreciate it. I mean, we could have done a podcast where we all asked each other like, let's come up with a theory of how this movie actually is working, because there are different interpretations of the movie where, like, you know, if he's trying to say something similar to Memento, then what we're watching is him basically incept himself, right? Where he's creating like a fake reality. I mean, he says he has this dream world that he's constructed where he gets to have his old memories, like relive them and change them. That's like what his stated goal is to Ariadne. And we see him in a few sequences walking with Maul, like as a young woman. And then we see the same sequences again later. And it's, oh no, we were old. And this thing, you know, like what is the reality of what's happening? Like, I think there are different ways to interpret it and like puzzle it together. And it's like a video game with like different endings. And that is a cool, just the fact that the movie has that is kind of cool to me. But I don't know.
Yeah, that is interesting. I mean, I've never really given a lot of credence to the like, is he still asleep at the end? Is he still awake? Or I mean, is he in reality at the end thing with the top? I always just felt like it was just another sort of like wink kind of thing, you know? That's just a game that he's playing because he likes to play these games, and also just to like allude to the fact, like in the movie analogy, right? Then it is just like, no, it's a movie, right? Like it's that kind of thing. Like it's not real or unreal, like you said. So, but I do appreciate like if you do dig into that argument, that is kind of interesting. Of like within the realm of the movie, like is he incepting himself? That is an interesting way to think about it.
Right. Yeah, it's not a point that I'm particularly interested in. You know, it's cool, but it doesn't affect my overall appreciation of the movie. It's just a little add-on, you know.
Well, that's the thing. I don't think there's a right. Yeah, I kind of don't think there's like a right or wrong answer, but I think just like you said, it's just a movie, you know. But what's really happening, like just that the fact that I don't know.
Oh, Charlie Kaufman is another one. That was like, you know, Synecdoche, New York is another one that's like, was another example when I was saying like The Matrix and Inside Out of like movies that like feel very expositional and dreamlike, but like very confusing if you don't just buy into the world. But that one works for me.
You like that more than Inception?
I do, but it's like I said, it speaks my brain language in a weird way.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff in that movie that I like, but not my favorite movie. What a goofy movie that is.
It is goofy. I like goofy shit. But the things that I like about this movie, I do like, I mean, just Michael Caine in the pocket. Like, he does nothing in this movie, but just having him there, it really is like another one of Christopher Nolan's voices, like we've said, that it's just like, he's just in the pocket in this like time in his career where he can come in, deliver fucking 6 lines and like deliver. You know what I mean? Like, I really appreciated seeing him again.
I'll say a couple.
Ken Watanabe.
What about him?
He's great. I think he's great in this movie. I think that he's like in the same way. He doesn't have a lot to do, but when he is old Saito, it's like it's a really cool image, and I think it really works.
There were some weird visual like similarities between this and some stuff that we've seen in other Christopher Nolan movies. When Ariadne sneaks away from behind Cobb while he's looking almost right at the camera and kind of doing his like monologue, almost the same shot as in Batman Begins when the Scarecrow is like talking, like looking out over his evil henchmen, and Katie Holmes runs away out of the. I think even to an elevator is where they run, so it's like incredibly incredibly similar shot. And there's another one where Joseph Gordon-Levitt is, tying people up in the hotel room and kind of like skirting around in 0G, and it's like it feels, even the color scheme, the color palette is extremely similar to Matthew McConaughey zooming around in the like library room with all the stretched out books in Interstellar. I also want to talk a little bit, because I mentioned it like last time, Christopher Nolan's view of politics, and it being just like I think his view is sort of like the great man of history. Like, some people just have the power to like exert their will, and if someone has an idea and they kind of like feed it down to the masses, that this idea will like that's what changes history. Where that kind of concept, I think, is pretty dated, and like a more materialist view of history is now like kind of, I think, more like accepted. But this movie literally is about like, no, an idea is what changes the world. An idea is like what drives reality. And I said like, ideas influence reality rather than vice versa. And then rich, powerful guys flexing is like what moves the world. And when there's the rioting hordes in the early sequence, when they're trying to extract from Saito, I was like, that is how he sees politics. Just like somebody has an idea and a bunch of people go, like rabble rousers, just like kind of like, riot. There's no reason, like they look vaguely like, South American or,
right.
Global South or whatever. But I was just like, yeah, this guy, like, he sees stuff very well, but I don't know that it's like well interpreted.
Did I bring you guys closer to where I am?
No, like you said, it just doesn't speak to you, but it clearly speaks to us. The one, if I have to critique part of it, because like I said, I wasn't as I didn't have as like immersive an experience this time for whatever reason, but I did feel like the like kind of opium dream den that they went in, that felt a little bit like that art you see online where someone's like snorting a line of likes off their cell phone, or like injecting like Instagram into their arm. Do you know those like horrible artwork? It felt a little bit like that. I was like, ooh, that's like skirting something a little bad taste.
I only appreciated it because it was such a James Bond tribute. Like that whole segment where they're sort of, I mean, I guess it's most of the first 2/3 of the movie when he's sort of building the team and going like that's all so James Bond, and like the Tom Hardy one and then that one, like they all just feel like straight out of a James Bond movie. And I did appreciate like that it was good versions of that, even though that in James Bond or in this movie is like an outdated kind of cringy thing, when they go into like an opium den and like see like that kind of stuff is a little, you watch it in James Bond and you're like, yeah, but this isn't good for the world. It's just kind of fun to watch, and you have to like duck that wave a little bit. But I was able to duck that wave when I was watching this one too, because I was just like, he's just doing a Bond movie, like in a lot of ways.
Right. Yeah, there's just some little things, when you watch it even closer, like this time. Like I said, I love this movie, and there's just little tiny details that I'm like, I'll forgive you for that. Like, why don't you just bring your kids to him? Michael Caine goes all over the place.
Right.
Why not?
Right.
Why can't
There's so
your kids
many
have
things.
like some kind of like, no, can't leave the country sort of policy on them? I don't think so. Or like the part where, Leonardo DiCaprio, you cannot tell anyone. Don't tell me, especially the layout of your dreams or anything. Don't tell me anything. Then there's the stronghold. He's like, we don't have time for this. Tell me, did you add anything? Did Eames add anything? Yeah, there's an air duct. Okay, great. Now tell them. Why did you tell him? Yeah. Just tell them. Like, why?
Well,
did you
that's
have to
the
tell
question,
Leonardo
right?
DiCaprio?
So there are plot holes in his movies, and he does love putting plot holes in movies, like on purpose. And if Ariadne and Cobb ever stopped talking, like maybe you would sit back and be like, wait a minute, but they don't, and so it just keeps going forward. You don't worry about it. That is like by design. But there are these little things, like in the very first scene, you see Saito like playing with his totem, which is like, nobody can touch your totem, then all bets are off, there are these things like throughout the film, and I think if you go back, you could make a case like, oh wait, he is just like incepting himself. He does want to know the layout of this dream for some reason, so he can do something. I don't know.
Yeah, no, like I said, there's all these little things, but I forgive just about every single one of them because I just love the experience of watching this movie. I think maybe the reason it didn't make my top 10 at the time was because the movies that I listed were ones I would literally put on at any given time and be totally cool just sitting down and watching it. This is a movie that I think is benefits from having a little bit of time in between viewings, and maybe that's why it wasn't on my initial top 10 as you guys mentioned. But again, great movie, totally love it. Was there anything else we should touch on before we go ahead and rank them?
I want to say, like, Ian, you mentioned, I think, like, something about, like, you're shooting people. Is that have, like, when they say, are you just, when Ariadne asks, are you destroying parts of his subconscious when you shoot them?
Yeah.
And he's like, no, they're just projections. Doesn't that sound like something like 15 years later, like the Dream FDA is going to be like, so it turns out when you shoot parts of your subconscious, they are dying. Like, it just sounds like something that's like, like asbestos or like, gas stoves or something, where it's like the way the explanation he gives her feels like, I'm not convinced that is okay. And I think the movie is aware of that. I think it's like, they're tampering in, with like absolute confidence and no kind of self-doubt. We are screwing with people's brains, and we are not taking this as seriously as we should. And like, I think again, that's part of the story, but it's like, that really cracked me up when he's like, no, it's fine.
Totally.
No. I mean, I have more notes, but I'm ready to save them for next time because, we can rate this thing. This was a hard one for me to rate because there's so much that I really do enjoy in this movie, especially the spectacle of it. Like I said, that the floating fight scene while you're like, cross-cutting between all these different layers of dream state, and it's so effective, and it's like it's what movies are made of, right? It's so good. But I don't know, but it's also, like I said, it doesn't necessarily hit me the way some of his other movies have. So for me, I still have Dark Knight, Batman Begins, Memento, then Inception, then The Prestige, Insomnia following. And I have a feeling it's kind of going to stay right about there for me, but we'll see.
Wow. That's pretty far down there.
Wait, where was Inception? Sorry.
Below Memento. So it's not, that's not crazy, like, right? Like, Memento's a great movie to me. And it was like so revelatory when I watched it the first time that like it has a sort of place in my heart,
I feel like Memento gets better every time I watch it.
Yeah, no, I'm saying, so Memento's number 3 for me, and then Inception's number 4. Mm-hmm. So that's where it's at for me, personally.
Enough. What about you, Travis?
Okay, I'll go. Inception, number 1. Batman Begins, Dark Knight, tie, number 2. Memento, number 3. Prestige, number 4. Following 5. Insomnia, 6. But those are, I feel like maybe you could switch.
Oh, did I finish? I don't think I finished. Inception, Prestige, Insomnia following, but yeah.
Nice. Yeah, my list is exactly the same, only Inception now is number 1 and everything else gets bumped down. So Inception, Memento, Dark Knight, Prestige, Insomnia, Batman Begins, and following. Boom.
Fair enough.
Not a popular
basically
choice, but hey.
Yeah, again, no, this is the one, like I said, that when I've been sort of on my heels talking about Nolan this whole time. It's because I knew this one was coming. I know how much you guys love it. I'm like, it just doesn't work for me as much. I mean,
I feel like we didn't really get at the heart of why. I mean, it's just like, why not? Like, it doesn't speak to you.
Why doesn't
but I
it
kind of
work for
want to
me?
know. I feel like I don't understand fully. Like, so many people do love this movie, and but I have to say, a lot of people I know really it left them cold, and I would like to. I had so much to like blather about. I feel like I didn't really let you say like what you said it doesn't speak to you, but is there something that's like keeping you from loving it?
So what it
or,
really
like,
comes down to me was like a big part of it was, like I said, just imagining what he's not an underdog. He's getting $180 million. I don't need to give him a break. Like and a big part of it was, why this? Like, why is this the guy that gets this gift of like making whatever
that's outside
movie
of
he wants?
the artwork though. That's I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in like, is there something about this movie that you know what I mean?
Well, it does have to do with it, because when I'm watching it, I can't help but be like, is this worth it? Like, wouldn't it be like, what if it was, one of my guys? I don't know. Like, it's hard to like put my finger on that. But anyway, aside from that, a huge part of it was that thing that I hate talking about because it makes me sound like I think that I'm hella smart. And trust me, I don't. But that I did get it the whole time. And the exposition felt too mathematical and getting you to this place the whole fucking time that I'm like, okay, like, I get it. You're not that fucking smart. Like, it's not that complicated. That's how I felt watching it the whole time. Was just like...
But he makes it complicated. That's the whole point of it. Like, I don't know.
But when he was trying to make it... when it was getting overcomplicated to me, it was when it started getting into the unincorporated dreamscape space or whatever it was, unconstructed dream space. And at that point, I'm just like... It just didn't click all the way. But again, it's still above the Prestige. Like, it's
okay,
still
I'm
like,
not into the ranking. I'm just talking about this movie. But okay, I think I get it, kind of, yeah.
I don't know. It just doesn't fucking hit. It just doesn't speak my, or I don't speak its language. That's all I can say about it. Like, there's not really, again, I can appreciate it in the same way that I can watch, like, a new kids movie with Greta that, like, isn't speaking to me, but be like, yeah, but I can see why she loves that movie. I don't know.
Are we children to you, Ian? Are we babies to you?
No, not quite yet.
Right.
Maybe after we talk Interstellar, we'll get there.
Ooh.
Just kidding.
All right,
So
guys.
are we all there yet? I mean, I don't know. This is a pitter-patter ending that sucks. I feel bad. I do want to like this movie. Like, I embraced watching it. Like,
you clearly do like it, but you also
do have
kind
to
of,
like this movie.
are annoyed by it.
You're wrong. Just kidding.
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
I just wish, I liked talking about this movie. I really liked watching it, but I feel like there is like this school of people who don't like Inception and people who do, and I just don't understand the arguments, because visually and like, kinetically, it is like such a powerful film to me, and emotionally,
But I wanted you guys to like convince me. I came into it being like, tell me why this is like your favorite movie. And I don't think you did.
Yeah,
like, why is this your
not.
favorite? Why is this better than like The Matrix to you?
We were out of time. We have to go and get going, but
we're gonna keep this podcast going, so we'll talk more. Because like I said, he's plateaued. Sorry. All right. I love you guys.
All right.
All right. Thanks, film friends.
Oh,
Bye.
Bye, film friends.
Thank you for listening to Autour Detour. We'll see you again next week.